For over 400 years, one dynasty in ancient China didn't just rule, it literally defined what it means to be Chinese. We're talking about a golden age of invention, the heart of a global superpower, and, well, the stage for a political drama of truly epic proportions. This is the incredible story of the Han Dynasty.
So let me ask you a question. What could possibly connect the invention of paper, the world's very first earthquake detector, and the legendary Silk Road? They seem totally unrelated, right? Well, they all sprang from this one remarkable period in history, the Han Dynasty.
You have to understand, the Han Dynasty was an absolute technological and scientific powerhouse. I mean, to put it into perspective, while a lot of the West was still working out the basics of iron, the Han were engineering these incredibly complex solutions to problems that wouldn't be solved anywhere else for like another 1,000 years.
But it wasn't just about inventions. With these massive armies and a super sophisticated bureaucracy, the Han projected their power all across Asia. They were shaping the ancient world, connecting East and West in a way that had never happened before.
And their rule, it provided centuries of stability. It fostered a cultural identity so strong that its legacy is still very much alive today. And the crazy part? It all started with a commoner who became an emperor.
So first, let's just dive into the sheer ingenuity that defined the Han era. Seriously, this wasn't just a little bit of progress here and there, these were revolutionary leaps forward.
The scope of what they achieved is just staggering. We're talking about the invention of high-quality paper, which would completely change communication forever. The world's first seismograph to detect earthquakes from far away, which was incredibly important for an emperor who needed to know if heaven was, upset about something. They also perfected advanced iron casting, the crossbow, the super useful wheelbarrow, and they even wrote one of the most important math books in all of history.
Okay, just take paper, for example. Before the Han, as you can see here, records were kept on these heavy, super awkward wooden tablets. Can you imagine trying to run an entire empire with those things? Then, around 105 CE, a court official named Kai Lun perfects this recipe using tree bark and old fishing nets. This one invention was a total game changer for communication, for bureaucracy, for the spread of knowledge, everything.
And their genius wasn't just in engineering, it was in abstract thought too. Their famous text, the 9 chapters, wasn't just a bunch of theory. No, it was filled with practical problems like this one about buying chickens. It was all about using math to solve real-world issues of trade and taxes and engineering.
Now, all this innovation, it wasn't just for stuff at home. It was the engine that helped forge a global superpower, giving the Han this immense military and economic reach.
The heart of the Han military machine was the North China Plain. This unbelievably fertile region, combined with that centralized government we talked about, allowed the emperor to draft and supply these massive armies of soldier farmers. We're talking armies that just dwarfed anything else in the world at the time.
And the story of their global reach really starts with this one guy, Zhang Qian. He gets sent west in 138 BCE to find military allies, but he's captured and held prisoner for a decade. But he escapes, keeps going, and eventually comes back with these incredible stories of wealthy, sophisticated kingdoms in Central Asia. His reports of heavenly horses and jade got the emperor really interested, and that led to a second mission that officially opened up the legendary Silk Road.
Now, the crucial point here is that the Silk Road was never just about silk. It became the ancient world's first great information highway. It carried art, music, technology, and these transformative ideas. Most notably, Buddhism, which traveled all the way from India into China and would end up reshaping its culture forever.
But right at the height of all this power, deep philosophical cracks were starting to form inside the empire. A huge debate kicked off over the very role of the government in the economy. This whole debate was captured in a text called the Discourses on Salt and Iron. So on one side, you have the government's position. State monopolies on essentials like salt and iron were totally necessary to fund the military and protect the empire. But on the other side, you've got the Confucian scholars, and they're arguing that these state industries were corrupt, they made shoddy goods, and they violated a core moral duty. A government should rule by being righteous, not by trying to make a profit.
This philosophical divide, it was really a symptom of a much deeper problem. From the inside, the very foundations of the Han court were starting to decay.
So, during the later part of the dynasty, the Eastern Han period, a whole series of emperors died young, leaving the throne to kids. This created a massive power vacuum. Real power ended up in the hands of 2 competing groups, the Empress Dowagers, so the mothers of former emperors, and these powerful court eunuchs, who were castrated officials that controlled all access to the young emperor.
In the conflict between these factions, it got bloody.
It all led to something known as the Dangu, or the prohibition of court factions. This was basically a brutal political purge. The eunuchs systematically arrested or executed hundreds of their rivals in the scholar official class. It effectively gutted the central government of its best and brightest minds.
So with the government totally paralyzed by infighting and corruption running wild, the entire empire was like a powder keg. All it needed was a spark.
And that spark came in the year 184 CE. All across the country, a massive peasant uprising, known as the Yellow Turban Rebellion, just erupted. It was fueled by famine, by crushing taxes, and by this deep feeling that the government had completely lost its way.
This whole rebellion was justified by a really powerful Chinese political idea, the Mandate of Heaven. The thinking was that a ruler's right to rule was granted by a divine power. But, and this is a big but, it was never unconditional. If a dynasty became corrupt and failed to take care of its people, well, that was a sign that heaven had taken back its mandate, making it okay to replace them.
And here is the tragic irony. The court, now way too weak to put down the rebellion itself, lets these regional generals do it for them. But after they crush the rebels, these powerful warlords, they refuse to give up their armies. Instead, they turn on each other and on the court, carving the once unified Han Empire into 3 warring kingdoms and plunging China into centuries of chaos.
So the Han Dynasty was over, but its story doesn't end there. In fact, you could say its greatest legacy was only just beginning.
The political structure collapsed, cities were destroyed, the empire fractured into pieces. And yet, the cultural and ethnic identity that was forged over those 400 years, it proved to be stronger than any warlord's army.
And this right here is the crucial takeaway. The very name of the dynasty became the name for the Chinese people themselves. To this day, the majority ethnic group in China, which is the largest in the world, proudly identify as the Han people. It's a direct link stretching all the way back to this ancient golden age.
It leaves us with a final, really fascinating question. When you look at the whole story of the Han, the internal debates, the court rivalries, the reliance on military power, it really makes you wonder, are the seeds of an empire's fall always sown when it seems most powerful, most triumphant? It's a lesson from history that feels just as relevant today as it was 2,000 years ago.